I really believe work is tuition that you get paid for. Work is just a place for you to learn and experiment and try things and do things and figure out who the heck you are while getting paid to do it. And, honestly, what's better than that? It's instead of you paying to go to school, it's somebody's paying you to learn on their dime. What I think is really unfortunate about people holding themselves back and not showing up thinking about the value that they can create is that the only person it really shortchanges is themselves.
And the book, Nobody Cares About Your Career, so packed with insights, wisdom, really practical advice because I've started 8 companies from scratch, anywhere from a few employees to over 500 employees, lots of exits. Love being on the front lines in the game. I love operating. And that's a big thing I got out of your book is this is practical advice from the front line. It's not somebody just describing it from academia. Why did you write this book instead of a book for CEOs?
Oh, because CEOs aren't nearly as interesting as people who I would describe as being in their mid-chapter. I'm a mid-chapter person. I had a really smart person lend me that phrase once. And a mid-chapter person is a person that isn't at the beginning and they're not at the end either. They're in the middle of the chapter trying to figure it out. And, when I think about what I love most about being an operator and have loved, gotten the most out of in working at all different types of companies in a lot of different spaces, it's not the CEOs per se. It's the people in the trenches trying to figure it out on Mondays and Wednesdays and late at night and early in the morning. And I really, one of the greatest things about working at Barstool Sports was just how young people were. The average age of someone who worked at Barstool was probably 22, 23. And what I realized is that there's so much to learn from working with young people, but also that, the message of the book, which is really, get over your ego, put aside your insecurity, just go for it, know you're going to mess up. That's a message that I think speaks to everyone. And when I went, I don't read a lot of business books, but I had gone prior to writing it and browsed the aisles and kind of looked on Amazon. And there are a lot of books for how you get to be the CEO and for CEOs and very prescriptive. It's either someone telling you they are a CEO and they're perfect, or it's someone giving you've got to do these 3 things this exact way and you'll get there. And I'm not interested in hearing about perfection. I don't think anyone is perfect. And I don't think there's just 3 habits and ways to get to do something. So that's really what inspired me to write a book that is pretty voicey. It's my thoughts on work, really, from someone who's made every mistake out there, learned a great deal, and is still in the middle of my career.
Yeah, love all of that. It's interesting for me looking at so I built a number of companies. I still own and operate some of them, but I've worked with lots of companies, large and small, and I'll see a CEO change out, destroy the company or help it. But often it's this value creation engine inside. It's this team of 3 or 4 that's really getting it done. And it's wild for me to watch people give all the accolades or the opposite to the person at the top when all they should be really focusing on is this engine inside. Talk about that. That's what I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I sit on the board of Axon, which they make body cams and the taser. It's a publicly traded company. They're doing a tremendous amount of work in AI. And we had our board session last week, and you're exactly right. What was so impressive, the CEO is wildly impressive, but what was even more impressive is the engine created inside. And, when I think about my book, it's really about finding the engine inside of you because, that's what propels you in life and that's what propels you in work. And then when you look at a company, it's a company is the amalgamation of a lot of different people, a lot of different ideas, a lot of different facts. And being able to create, what we created at Barstool Sports was an engine. That's what propelled such radical growth in a very, relatively short amount of time. being able to harness that first within yourself, then within your team, then within your company can be, wildly gratifying.
Yeah, one of the themes I got from the book all the way through is creating value. Like you have to actually create value. And in my businesses, I've always thought about it as, yes, we have to create material value. It's how you value the business, but the emotional energy value, it's a superpower for leaders. It's the environment, the engaging environment. The spiritual value creation at its core is connectedness. So what are we doing to make sure, employees are connected with themselves, other
Yeah.
team members, communities that we touch, and all of it? I think about it holistically, and the multiples have always been so much higher because of that. So this whole part of coming in and creating value, that's not the perspective of a lot of folks coming into the workforce today
Yeah.
or in the workforce today. Talk about that a little bit and the importance of it.
Yeah, I love how you talk about this, like emotional value, spiritual value. I'm an emotional value 10 out of 10 person. Like I really care about emotional value, which is probably why I like music, because I completely agree with you. Music and emotion are so inextricably intertwined. I think one of the hard things right now happening at work is that people aren't showing up. I think it's very cool right now to not like work. It's kind of a badge of you're on your employer, you're mediocre on your job, you're mailing it in. And of course, that's always existed at work. But it's very palpable right now. I think it's in large part driven by social media. I think it's in large part driven by remote work, which I think is pretty debilitating to creating connection, spiritual, emotional, and material, value at work. I think it's pretty debilitating. But what I think is really a shame about that, and I write about it a lot in the book, is that I really believe work is tuition that you get paid for. And work is just a place for you to learn and experiment and try things and do things and figure out who the heck you are while getting paid to do it. And, honestly, what's better than that? It's instead of you paying to go to school, it's somebody's paying you to learn on their dime. And what I think is really unfortunate about people holding themselves back and not showing up thinking about the value that they can create is that the only person it really shortchanges is themselves. Because your company is going to find the value, and there are going to be people who show up and want to contribute. And I think there's a little bit of I think in 5 years, if you flash forward to the people who mailed it in all this time, and the people who really showed up trying to create value for themselves and others, it won't be comparable, the results of where those two groups are. And I think that's really hard, because it's hard to predict that in your own life, but it's really important. And I think it's because so much now is happening on Zoom, it's disintermediated. It takes a little bit of an extra kick now to show up and create value. I had a conversation this morning with someone who works for me, and we had an event on Friday, and this person wants to be involved in the events business. And I said, well, did you go to the event on Friday? And the person said, no, I worked from home. I didn't go into the event on Friday. And I was like, but you want to work in the events business. So if you want to work in the events business, you got to go to the events, and you got to create value around the events. That's how you earn the opportunity to do more in events. And first, that you would think that's quite obvious, and it just isn't. And I think everyone, even myself, needs a reminder of things like that. But I think that's pretty prevalent.
Yeah. Well, what I hear, you have to lean in and kind of do it. You can't just sit back and get a paycheck. And it's always felt to me like a double standard. It's okay for one individual to not do what they agreed to do for what they're getting paid for. And yet when they go home, if they hired somebody to do a service, could be paint their
Yeah,
house wrong color and half the paint falls off, they're going to be upset about it.
yeah,
So wait a minute, let's be real across the board.
exactly.
And regardless of what we're paid, let's do our best.
Yeah,
Regardless of what we're paid, we can change the environment, but
yeah.
why not always do our best?
Exactly. And I think, when your environment is relentless, this is another thing I write about a lot. So if you're in an environment that is just people being toxic or complaining all the time, or, just, crapping on work or whatnot, it's contagious. It's going to affect you. If you're in an environment where people are mailing it in and doing a bad job painting the house, or a bad job doing events or whatever it may be, that's also going to affect you. So, I think one of the biggest things now to create value is to put yourself in a situation where you're pushed to create value. And I think that's really important. Put yourself in an environment, be comfortable being uncomfortable. Put yourself in an environment where you have to stretch. And I don't think you ever regret that.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. You talk about understanding the reality in your book, understanding the realities of work and the environment that you're going to be working in. Why has everybody become such an expert on pointing out the problems everywhere, what's wrong with people and things, and why
Yeah.
stuff won't work, instead of course, it's not perfect, and now I get to contribute to making it better?
Yeah. It's funny because I always liked a lot of problems at work because I felt like it was job security for me, right? I felt like, ooh, if there's a lot of problems here, that means there's people who are dumber than me who work here. And also, I won't be out of a job because there's a lot to work on and fix. And I think now one of the things that happens a lot at work is, people spend more time just complaining about the people of it all, versus, hey, there's a problem here. This person isn't at their operating at their best. How do we get them there? This product isn't doing what we thought it should do. How do we get it there? And just that tweak in orientation from this isn't, this shouldn't, this is bad, just the talking of it to the doing something about it. I think it can make all the difference, because what you realize is if you just start doing small incremental things, you can create a lot of value and you can have a lot of impact.
Yeah, I like thinking about it as we have all these, structural functions, departments, teams within an organization. How is each one designed to create value? And then how are we measuring that? And is it driving the majority of the right behaviors? And then my next question is always, what's the best work we can do to increase the value that we're creating as a team?
Exactly.
100% in there. Um, so embracing failure, playing hurt, I've learned, and I love it, to trust the struggle. Like the harder it gets, I get this
Yes.
feeling inside, oh my gosh, it's going to be so good when I come out the other side.
Yes, exactly.
Talk about
That's
that
a
a little.
great phrase. Yeah. Trust the struggle, trust the process. It's hard. Things that are hard, I think ultimately are greatly worth it if you can stick with them. And there's obviously exceptions to that. But, I think what's hard right now, I think for folks, is having the patience and the confidence and the humor to struggle. And, the speed of the world is so fast. You can just chat GPT something you used to, you or I 20, 30, 40 years ago, we're struggling through stuff. Now you type in a prompt and it spits itself out for you. So I think the inclination to struggle, the tolerance of struggle has gotten very low. And I think that's very dangerous because struggle creates resilience. And if you are not resilient, you really, and I write a lot about this. If you aren't resilient, if you can't play hurt, you will never be great, because you will yes, you might keep moving up, but then you will get to a point where you're deeply challenged and you will not have the struggle to learn from, because struggles yield all sorts of learnings, and they may not show themselves right away and they may not add up just so, but struggle is a huge way to build skill. And I wish people would flip their thinking on that.
Yeah, 100%. I could always tell I was doing it right when the harder it got, the harder this core engine team laughed going
Yes.
going through. Like, yeah, we are definitely right. If you're doing it wrong, it goes the other direction and they chew each other up. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's definitely not healthy. For our listeners, so you're kind of the embodiment, like doing research on you, reading the book, listening to podcasts of career advancement, like so incredible. Just you can give our listeners a little bit of a background on kind of the different companies you went through and how you think about career advancement.
Sure. I started my career as a receptionist. So I got a job. I got an internship at Fidelity Investments as a receptionist. So humble beginnings, but I was so happy to have the job. No one in my family had worked in a big city. I worked in Boston. No one had ever had a corporate job. I had a corporate job. Um, and it's kind of you to say that you notice the advancement. I didn't have a big plan. I didn't go to business school, and I didn't get into my career saying, okay, I'm going to do this job, and then I'm going to move to this job, and I'm going to move to this job. My career was not like that. It was very meandering. So I started at Fidelity Investments. After I had that receptionist job, I got a big cushy job in the legal department. I hated it. I was bored. I was stifled. I realized I for a hot minute thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't. I took a big pay cut and a jump to go work still at Fidelity in the advertising group, and did love it. The internet was starting, which was really very defining for me in my career. I got laid off, and everything that went through that. I then went and worked at a whole bunch of ad agencies. In Boston, in New York, I started to take on more global roles. My first real big break was I got a job at Microsoft, a global role at Microsoft. And I then went on to work at Microsoft. I worked at Yahoo. I took a company called Demand Media public. I was part of that team. And then I became the CMO of AOL, and then left to go do a startup in music, which led me to Barstool Sports. So I've had a career mostly in the internet, most always in media. I've spent a lot of time at the intersection of technology and content and monetization. I've had huge, 100, 500, 700,000 person teams and teams of 5. So I've really, advancing, I would say, is that I've seen and done a lot, and I've been able to learn from a lot of people.
Yeah. And what was your sort of mindset or perspective going through that? It almost feels like, even not intentionally, there's another step I can go to learn and grow. Was that
Definitely. I was relentless about learning, relentless. And partly because I was insecure, and I felt that if I stopped learning, I would stop growing. And I was very afraid of that. I I write about this a lot in the book. I lived in Boston, and I could see as I was moving up the ranks at the ad agencies that there were fewer and fewer jobs. And I was getting to the place where there was only 3 of these people in town, right? There was me, there was the other lady at the other agency, and there was another guy at the other agency, and that was it. And I didn't like that because it made me concerned for my job security, which made me and it made me concerned about my future livelihood. I always wanted to be in a job that was opening 5+ opportunities for myself in 5 other places. And so I think the combination of wanting to learn, and then also the combination of being afraid to be without a job, really propelled me on that.
Okay. And all the different organizations that you worked with, people talk about culture. I feel like it's almost like a business buzzword that nobody really knows what it means and how to intentionally address it. But people will say this culture feels right. It doesn't feel right. These are the realities of work and the way you talk about it in the book. But speak to culture a little bit. And regardless of whether it's good or bad, can it be influenced by you coming into the culture, any individual?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can influence culture. I think you have to pay attention to culture, which is just another way of saying, how does it feel? What do people value? How do they behave? What do people talk about? What do they not talk about? How do they talk about stuff? What do they do at work? I think that's culture to me. I think anyone can have both a positive and a negative impact on culture. Um, I've worked in cultures I really hated. I worked at Microsoft, which I felt was a big company culture and a culture of no. And I didn't like it, but I did appreciate learning how to say no. And I wouldn't have gotten that had I not worked at Microsoft. Um, so I think you can learn from all sorts of cultures, good cultures, bad cultures, cultures that suit you, cultures that don't suit you. And I think it's the ingredients from all of that learning that help you understand the cues that you are entering a culture where you can be successful. And changing a culture or having a positive impact on a culture, it's pretty basic. And you have to care, which I think people underestimate the value of caring. I think you have to contribute. You have to show up. You have to show value. You have to participate, not just when it looks good or the cameras are on, but always. And then I think you have to be willing to get feedback and see how it works, see how it doesn't work, and adapt accordingly. And I think if you can do those three things, you can pretty much do anything in life, but you can certainly impact a culture.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of employer-employee relationships are super transactional. We hired you to do this, please do that. And I've always thought of my team members as individuals where their lives are just, if not more important to them than mine is to me. They're on a journey, and we're here supporting and helping each other down that road. That's how I kind of dealt with it. That's what caring meant to me. Yeah. Any other sort of insights on your side and how that manifests?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. And I tend to see it the same way. I think one thing that's really tough right now is most management is happening over video. And the crop of managers we have today are not well trained. They're conflict avoidant. They didn't have to have conflict because you could just, hang up the Zoom and you're done. You don't have to look at the person after you yell at them in the hallway. That creates a little bit of distance. So I think treating people with respect is obviously super important. I like to see what we can create together, and let's make something happen. Let's push ourselves. That is for some people, and it's not for other people. And I think one thing as a manager and a leader is like, hey, if this isn't for you, that's totally okay. Let's get you off the bus, and get you onto a bus that works for you. So I think, I wrote the book in some small part because I don't think people are giving people at work much feedback anymore, and getting a kind of straight talk of like, here's what's going to work for you and here's what might not work for you, I think is something that's very needed because I don't think it's happening so much.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised really that anybody waits 6 months or a year to do performance reviews, and then people are surprised when it happens. Because literally 100% of the time, every team member should know exactly what's expected, exactly where they stand regarding how the value that they're creating for the organization. So I always call them performance snapshots. We're going to take a snap point in time. We know where you're at. Let's have a conversation about taking step change, improvements, right?
Definitely.
How did you handle the performance review side of it? Was it ongoing? Did you drop them? What did you do there?
Same. I worked for someone once who came out of Autodesk, and she had the same philosophy that you do, which is that your performance review is every day. Like, you should be getting feedback in the moment. And I really believe in that. I'm better with real-time feedback. I like to get feedback. If I screw something up, the sooner I know about it, the more quickly I can make it right. And I think when something happens, good or bad, and you don't tell someone, and then you wait 3 months or 3 weeks or 6 months, it either the sting of it gets bigger if it's a bad thing, and the shine of it is lower because it was so long ago. So it actually doesn't work in either scenario. I am a huge, huge proponent of feedback. Always. And when things don't go right, I say so. And when things go great, I say so. And I expect the same of myself, and, that people always say thank you. And those are, because, regardless of how someone's doing at work, they are trying, and you have to acknowledge that effort. But I really do think that people deserve to know, hey, you just did a great job at that small little thing you just did. Like, way to go. Like that changes somebody's day in a way that you can't even comprehend. And hey, you fell a little short on this, and here's why, and here's what happened. And, what do you think a different way to approach that might be? That makes someone feel invested in, and that they have a teammate. And I always wanted people to feel like we had teammates.
I love that. I heard you say something along the lines, I'm probably going to get it wrong, but some of the dumbest people in the organization are the ones that have no idea how they create value for the organization.
Yes. Yeah.
And isn't that on employees as well? It seems like it's shifted that if anything isn't perfect, it's the management's fault.
Yeah.
Leader's fault. Where does the employee come into that? Like, oh my gosh, how could you not know how you create value for the organization and then be a victim when you get called out on it?
100%. Yeah. I think the line is, the dumbest person at the company is the one who doesn't understand how the company makes money, which is true. I stand by that. But value and money are all the same thing. I think, one thing that happens at work is you get so caught up in all the minutia and that you forget what you are there to do, which is to create value in a very specific type of role. And I think I think checking yourself to keep yourself present on that is really important. I had a situation this week where I have a woman who works for me who's doing me a huge solid. She's taken on a bunch of extra stuff. She's doing a ton of work. And I need like these 6 things from her. And she keeps showing up with the 7th thing, the 9th thing, the 15th thing, the other thing. And I'm like, hey, these are all great, but I need the 6 things. Like, I need the 6 things. Your value here is predicated on the 6 things. And it's important before you go pontificating or complaining or offshooting to remember what you were hired to do and to be honest with yourself on, are you delivering that? And I think that's important for everybody to do at the company always.
Yeah. One of the best intended, dumbest things I ever did, and this is going back quite a number of years, is have a suggestion box. And then I had all the employees setting back hundreds of stuff coming in, folded arms going, nobody listens to me, because you can't do all of it. And mostly I weren't very well thought out. So I shifted it and I said, what can you fully own? What's your idea to, increase the value of create as an organization in all 3 categories that you can get across the finish line? And if you can't do it, you can do it with your team, or your manager can take it up if need be. And then it flipped everything. Everybody owned continuous improvement. It was nuts. How fast
that's
we grew,
awesome.
the value created.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Have you ever tried, how did you get feedback and get them to own it and not flip who reports to who and how we're supposed to be working together in the most effective value creating way?
Yeah, I love your suggestion. I think that's a great way to do it. And I'm going to steal that. But I'm a big believer in vision. So I think you have to be setting a vision for people. And to your point, a vision is spiritual, it's emotional, and then it's material, or, it has empirical value. And what I really like to do is to get people bought into a vision, which is, hey, this is what we're here to do. This is our mission. This is what we're trying to achieve. And then I really believe good ideas come from everywhere. So I'm a big open door person. I take feedback and suggestions. I actively solicit feedback and suggestions from everyone, always. And I like to create a culture where good ideas come from everywhere and anywhere. And that's really how I've done it. Less organized than you, for sure, probably less efficient. But it's given me a good feel for who are the idea people, and the idea people sit all over an organization, and who are the initiative people, and who are the people they may not come with all the ideas, but they can take the ideas. And I really look for those 2 types of people.
Okay. Awesome. One more question about the book, then I want to get into Barstool Sports and then Food 52. So I wrote a book titled Your Most Important Number, and I put a lot of thought into how to structure it to help the readers and who the audience is. How did you think about structuring Nobody Cares About Your Career that would really be helpful? I mean, I loved how it went through, and I recommend everybody reads it that's in an organization at any level, especially the top. But how did you think about structuring it rather than, because you did a great job. It's not like a lot of business books, nugget dumps.
Yeah.
And then we have to connect the dots. Talk about how you structured it.
Yeah, I had a lot of help, which was great. I was kind of writing and writing and writing and writing and writing, and it was unwieldy. And the Pam, my editor, and I really sat together and we said, okay, let's distill down, let's like zoom out and talk about what are we really trying to say to people. And, what we really came down to is we were trying to say, how do you get your head in the game for work? Like, how do you get yourself right so that you can be right at work? That's part one. The second part, and I'm kind of tongue in cheek about it, but it's, how do you deal with the idiots you have to deal with at work? But how do you make work work? And that was really important to me. The heart of the book is really, how do you make work work, overlaid in how do you make yourself work at work? And then the last part was, really personal, which is, how do you know when it's time to stay or leave? And I was writing this book as I was, my last year and a half at Barstool Sports. And I was kind of thinking about what's my next gig going to be? What's my life going to be like after this? And I do feel that it's at that moment where you start, what I get probably a couple hundred Q&A questions every week, just in my DMs or on LinkedIn. And they're usually always about, when is it time to leave? And I really felt that do I stay or do I go? I don't really like it, but I don't know what to do about it, is a really betwixting moment for people that I wanted to write about. And then it just so happened that I was going through that as I was writing it.
Love it. Great job. Thank you for that. And as I was listening to you talk through this, how do you get to a place where it doesn't matter what's going on culturally, good boss, bad boss, et cetera? How do you put a shield up that says, I'm not going to let that affect me? Because I like to focus on, this is the value I'm creating. And there'll be a little bit to sometimes a lot of bit of folks attacking what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like, that's nice. If you don't have a better way of creating value, I'm going to stay on this course. If you do,
Yeah.
I'll listen. But if not, I'm going to stay here. What's your advice for building a shield?
The shield is super important. And it's very hard. I think even the best people can say they build a shield, but you still, people can really rankle you. Stuff can really affect you. I write a lot about how I've had jobs with, bosses who I thought were bad bosses, and I brought it home every day. Like I wore everything I didn't like about my job every day. So I think the shield is important. And a vision helps create the shield. And if you have a vision for the value you want to create at work for yourself, and I write a lot about this in section 2 of the book, which is, how do you create value for yourself and for your company at the same time? Like, if you can figure that out, you're in good shape. And when you have a vision, your vision can keep you focused, and the focus keeps you away from all the noise and distraction. And so that's really my advice on this, is to use your vision as your guardrail and your guardian to get your head just thinking about what it needs to do and where you want to be.
Love that. That's amazing. In my work, I've worked with hundreds of companies, and one of them, a couple of founders, an idea for the company blew through about $14-15 million of investor money. The investors came to me and said, please help. So I've completely changed the direction of the company, and we're building a community of parents and guardians around the world, raising kids to create value in the world. So I told my team this morning, and the company's called Dinner Table, just changed the name, and told the core team, this engine team this morning, who I was going to be interviewing on the podcast. And they said, oh, we're deploying the Barstool method to build community. It's like, I had no idea that was a thing. And I was like, that's fascinating. So in 4.5 months now, we're at just over 9,000 community members.
Great.
And growing quick. That feels really fast to me, but it's picking up speed around that. So thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's so great to hear. That's cool.
And I'm not a huge sports fan. I taught martial arts for about 23 years, but I went and looked at the website Barstool Sports. It's like, man, this is super edgy and honest. This is really
rowdy.
I can't wait to dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of things there. What was it like? I mean, your journey and your development, like what were the bigger sort of stages from when you onboarded to 9 years later leaving? What did you learn?
Oh, so much. It was wild. I mean, it was a wild run. I loved it. I learned so much. It was, Dave Portnoy, the founder, kind of talks about like Barstool's dog year. So like a 1 year at Barstool is 7 years anywhere else. And I think that's really pretty true. So, I would say the things that I learned, one, there's a great luxury in that I started with not much. So there wasn't a lot of establishment. They didn't have a P&L. There were no internal systems. There were 15 people. So one of the great luxuries, which I would encourage to anybody, is going into something unformed and trying to form it. I really found that if you were to say what was your favorite time at Barstool, I would say the beginning, where we didn't know what it could be, if it could be anything, and how it would be that thing. So I think that's wildly exciting, and I learned a lot. I think the second piece is, we created a culture there that is insanely hard to replicate. And there were a couple ingredients of that culture. One is a defiant desire to do things our own way. So to go learn how other people were doing things, but to do everything in a way that just worked for us, and a real commitment to that. And then two was hiring a lot of people who came from really weird places. So Barstool was a place where pedigree didn't play. And the people who really succeeded were self-taught for the most part. And really learning from self-taught people can be insanely exhilarating. There's so much to learn. And then the third piece is really, it's the story of the journey as you're on the journey. And that really is the secret, and probably what your folks are thinking about on the community side, which is it's the story behind the story, which is how is this being made, not just what's being made. And I think there were so many lessons along all three of those things.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yes, I think the purpose of an education is to create value in the world, not get a good grade, diploma, degree, a job, going through. People aren't buying your degree, but I feel like that's a big part of it. And I love that you took folks that self-taught, figured out how to create value in the world, put them together, and created so much more value than really anybody else in space, right? Doing that.
And that made it feel really, really, really good. When you can create value with a group of people that no one thought could create value, that sticks with you.
Yeah, I don't think that's something they teach in business school.
I don't think so.
Like building this engine, identifying the right players, and then growing it, this value creation engine inside. They don't teach it. It's kind of academic. So I'm not a huge fan of most business education programs for that reason. Let's get in the real world and actually do.
100%. Work is an apprenticeship for sure.
Yeah, 100%. I learned by doing, for sure. Food 52. So why the move? And I went to that website, looking at all these recipes and all this cool stuff.
So different.
Really cool. I can't wait to dig into that a little bit. Yeah.
I had, so I had been at Barstool almost a decade, and I really felt I understood a male consumer, right? I really understood the 18 to 34-year-old male, and even really beyond that. And I also understood how to work with wildly talented founders and creators, and it was really exciting. And what I wanted for myself was I knew it would be very hard to love a job and feel about a job the way I felt at Barstool, just from where I found it to where it got to. But I wanted to work with women, and I wanted to work in a space that was very different, and I wanted to put myself back on a big learning curve, because I had been in a vortex, a massive learning curve for a decade, but it was all around one thing. And I felt like it was good to go humble myself and to also, see what I could bring to bear and see what I could accomplish in a new realm. I write about this in the book, which is, 70% of it I think I know, and 30% I have no idea. And how do I do those two things? So Food 52 is a really interesting company. It's a lifestyle company, it's a commerce company. They own a brand called Schoolhouse, which is an American factory, a lighting and design company based in Oregon. We own the brand Dansk, which is, a beloved heirloom brand, which really celebrates Scandinavian design. And then Food 52 is interesting because it was really one of the first brands to democratize the kitchen and the table and really think about home cooks and appealing to people at home and making products for people at home and kind of celebrating that, food is the center of a well-lived life and figuring out how to bring that to life. So I've been here, months at this point. So, not that long, and, it's good. It's very different.
Yeah. How do you think about differentiating in this space? I mean, it's packed.
Tough. Yeah, it's different. I think, I really like this space because it has a bunch of different things at once. It has design, which I'm really interested in. It has manufacturing. It has how the product or the experience is delivered to the end consumer. And then it has how do you keep the use case going? And, I think a lot of what's happening in the home space is it's Amazon, right? So it's you get it overnight. You don't think much about it. You don't really care where it comes from. There's not a high bar for quality, and you don't really think much about it. So it's not high consideration. And then you also have a little bit of the same thing happening if you look at West Elm, or, it's just everything is from China. There's 100 versions of everything. And I really do think there is something for storytelling and the why behind the what, and really focusing on and featuring great design, and also focusing on and featuring a great consumer experience. And that's what I'm really playing with right now.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like there would be a giant play to build community there.
Definitely. Huge. I completely agree. Yep.
Yeah. When you think about digital marketing, where it started, how you got in early, where it is today, and where it's going, like what's different today from 10 years ago, better, worse? And then from there, where do you see it going? There is so much noise out there.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Media is kind of over and also everywhere, which is in my heyday, it was all about television. It was, how can the internet be legitimate against television? And, we're there. The idea of an authority brand and media telling you how something should be done is kind of over. Media, I think, has always been about, the possibility of transformation, right? You're transformed into something else. You're transformed by what you're inspired by or what you watch. And TikTok has changed that radically. Instagram has changed that radically. Facebook, Google, et cetera. So I think we're in an era where media is obviously very democratized and everyone is media. And I think what's going to happen next is the desire for curation. There's so much saturation. I was listening to an Eric Schmidt talk this weekend, and I think he said that in 90 minutes, a person can go through over 200 videos on TikTok. Just the volume that we're consuming is so big. So I think we will move into an era of curation. And then I think we're going to move into an era trying to understand authenticity, mostly because of AI and, what's real and what's fake. I think that's going to be the next frontier after that.
Yeah. Like, how do we do that? I've gotten to a point where there could be good news, negative news, whatever news, and it looks like it's coming from a person. But my question is it an AI bot? Is it a
Yeah, you just
paid
have no idea.
push so I just have a filter set I run everything through.
Yeah.
Does this make sense that it's creating value? Yes or no? And does it align
Yes,
with that?
exactly. You have to have your own. People will need filter sets.
Yeah. So education on that, we should write a book on that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's the next wave for sure.
How to think about it. So I'm in the middle as interim CEO of this company called Dinner Table, of getting it on the right track. I'm nurturing folks to come in and potentially, be our CEO going into next year. Love the progress, everything going on. What's your advice on, and for our listeners, anybody building a community? How should we be thinking about building a winning community?
Oh, communities are fun. One, you got to be dedicated to the community. You got to show up every single day, and it's hard, because you get distracted. Something more important happens. You're tired. You've got to show up every single day. So that's the first thing. It's consistency, and it's true repetition. You got to be there all the time. I think the second thing with community is when something happens that is relevant to that community in the news, as a headline in the world, you have to be able to harness the community. To create a community, you have to have integrity in the community, that the community is really about this thing. So if that's values in your family, when anything happens in the world about family values or values in the family or parenting, the community, someone in the community has to have a voice on that topic. I think that's really important. I think the third piece is it takes a long time to build, where it's like the struggle. You don't necessarily see the success while you're in the middle of it, but you have to get through that middle to get to the success. So just the stamina and keeping at it is really important in community.
So managing expectations, this could take 2 years, 3 years to really get the flywheel.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would say is find new places to create community. Is it Facebook groups? Is it Substack? Is it Reddit? Like, where is this community? And are there different communities that exist in different places? And thinking about community as a macro idea, but also as in a micro environment.
Yeah, love that. And I'm connected. I was just trying to do the math in my head. Probably 6 times a week to the community, training licensees that are building their own communities.
Great.
With communities. I feel like I have to be in the middle of it, or how the
Definitely.
heck? What next steps need to take, or connect
Definitely.
faster way.
Definitely. You got to stay super close to it. You can't outsource community.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Anything else that you would like to
No, this was awesome.
I'm
Thank
having
you.
so much fun. Was there one big takeaway from our discussion that you got out of this?
Oh, I think emotional value is just a great thing to think about. I've never used that phrase, but I really, really like that phrase. And I think how you have emotional value for yourself, for your partner, for your family, for your work is just a really great way to crystallize a lot of what this book is about.
Love that. Yeah, I believe the scarcest commodity on the planet is positive emotional energy.
Yeah.
They live half as long on 9 or 10 on a scale from 1 to 10 than on 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Twice as long. And when I think about intentionally cultivating my abilities around material value creation, emotional energy, and spiritual, emotional energy is the one I think I'm the best at. And I've had exits from a few million to well into 9 figures. I've owned the majority of everything I've done. I've never taken a dollar of outside investment. So people will look at that and say, oh, that's so amazing. Look at all the money. Well, wait a minute. How we felt going through it. And
that's all that matters.
Did that, and the connectedness, that's the stuff that really matters. I guess one last question for you, Erika, is what can we do to shift people to think about this in balance? Because it seems like the money is the thing. But if it's only that, these are miserable people.
Yeah, 100%. I think most people are miserable. It's too bad. I think we are getting there. And I think a lot of people are wasting all their time just scrolling on a screen. Like you're almost numbing your unhappiness, right? And I think the more you can be present and be positive and infect people, it carries on. One person gets to it's a human endeavor. And I think the more you can have impact on the people around you, at least I try for that, the better off, I think we'll be.
No, that's fantastic. I've had an absolute blast. Thank you so much for spending
Thank you.
Me. Really, really appreciate you. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And until next time, show your value to the world.